right, I think we're rolling. Hello, hello. All right, so we are going to, this is actually technically tutorial number 2, but this is where I'm actually going to show you how to get started and how to do the basic cross stitch. I have gotten over, I had a sinus infection and I'm getting over that, so I'm doing much better, but now the medicine is really drying me out, so you may see me getting sips of water as I go through this. So forgive me for that in advance, but we are going to roll with this. Okay, so what you see here is I've got a floss bobbin, and there are different ways that you can store your floss. However, for my niece's sake, we're going to start with the bobbins, and then if she decides that she's really into it, then she can decide to store her threads however she wishes. I decided to go with a pink floss. This is a DMC, and this is number 335. And I'm still getting used to trying to look through the phone at my work, so I think I'll get better once I get used to it, but anyway, we're going to deal with it. Okay, and I'm making sure, sometimes my needle gets a little wonky here. This is a needle minder that I won, or earned, I'll say earned rather. This is from embroidery.com, and they have these, they're not stitch-alongs, but they're it's where you have a challenge and you have to post every day for a month. And in February they do what's called the Love to Stitch challenge, and they've only done it for a few years. But this is a needle minder, and it's got the needle here on the back that you can slide off. Okay, it's pretty strong too. But I met the challenge, so I've won it. So I am, normally this is going to go on your cloth. Now there's not a whole lot here, but you take your the back portion, put it in the back, and then this goes on the front, and see, it stays there, and then see, and my needle is going to stay put. Okay, so I am going to take it off right now because it's going to weigh down this little piece. Normally if I put it in a hoop or something, it's a little sturdier, so I'm just going to set it there for right now. And so I'm going to start with a Sharpie. No, they have not asked me to, they're not paying me for this endorsement. This is the ultra fine point, and so there's your point. I'm trying to do this where it won't get blurry. These I have found are the best things to use when you are putting numbers and things on your bobbin, because you need to know which color it is. Some people will actually take, they'll cut this number off and they will put it, they'll tape it onto the bobbin, and I've done that before. It's okay. I don't think it's the best. I actually rather just write the number on there. So what I'm going to do, since this is number 335, let's see if I can make that a little bit better. There we go. I am going to, sometimes it takes a little bit to get going. Once it gets going, it's fine. And I try to go over this just a couple of times to make sure it's going to stay. Now, what you want to do is you want to undo this. Let me zoom back out a little bit. That's a little much. And when you take the labels off here, you are going to end up, and you have to be really careful when you just kind of pull that out. Now I've got this, and so I find my end, which this one looks like the end's a little kind of tangled there. That normally doesn't happen, but here, now I've got an end that comes out. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to slowly undo just a few circles at a time so it doesn't get really tangled. And let me move these out of the way. I don't need them now. And find my end over here. If it goes out of the camera range a little bit, I do apologize. I just have to get used to this. So I just grab an end like this and I just start winding. And I try to cover the whole bobbin so I don't get like big clumps on one end. And then I keep winding, and then once I get kind of past that, I'll let go. And once you've done this a whole lot, you can do it pretty quickly. I can usually get a bobbin done in, I don't know, a minute or so. This will take a little bit more than a minute because I want to show you. So everything is going to slow down while I'm teaching, which is how it should be. And you have to trust me because I teach public school for a living. So teaching somebody to do something is not new, although teaching cross stitch is a little different than teaching the social studies and language arts that I've taught for many years. I've taught humanities and reading and who knows what else. And who knows what else I'm going to teach before this is all over with, because I still have a few years left. But yeah, it's been an interesting journey. But I have really enjoyed figuring out the best way to teach someone else to cross stitch. I like the idea of passing along this fine, I mean, this is not the only one, obviously, but we have many needle arts, crafts, quilting is one of them. Quilting has been big in our community, and honestly, in the United States, quilting is as popular as cross stitching is in England. If you go to the UK, okay, I'm trying to just, we're almost at the end here, so I'm just going to kind of pull it on out. When you go to the UK, there are cross stitching clubs all across the country. They love their cross stitch. So I do get magazines and ideas from them, but we do have, especially since the advent of Facebook, and there aren't a lot of positives to Facebook, but one of the positives is that all of these cross stitching groups in the United States have popped up, and there's even a local group that I found, and I've just been so excited about that, to have people to share the love of this craft with. Okay, so now you see I have completely got the bobbin done, and it's pretty even, and that way, if you want to put this into some kind of a box that has a lot of bobbins in it, they have boxes where you can put them in there. You're not gonna, I mean, it's gonna be easier to fit them in there together rather than having, like one side really clumped up and the other like really thin. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to unwind a little bit. Now, this is where, whether you're putting on the bobbin, if you put it on a floss drop, it's a little bit easier, but the typical length that you want is about 15 inches. And some people measure by, it's like from the tip of your finger up to your elbow. And, I don't really like to do that. But on floss drops, it's easy to come up with the 15. But with this, what I typically do to get my 15 inches, and I'm going to show you a trick here. I'm going to unwind like 1, 2, 3. Then I'm going 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Do that about 4 times. And I'm going to show you why I'm doing this, because it looks longer than 15 for sure. Here are my lovely scissors. So I am just going to clip that. And I can't tell. One thing I'm going to have to learn is not to hit that camera so much. And I need to be able to tell whether this is blurry or not. So, all right. Hard to do with these bifocals too. It's part of aging, unfortunately. Okay, so I'm going to set this aside. Okay, now this is a pretty long length. So what I'm going to do, and I'm going to show you, let's see, let me do this. Okay, when you are looking at this thread, there are 6, this is a 6-ply strand. And so I am going to take my nails, and you can see how I'm separating. I'm only going to pull out 1. And the easiest way to do this, let's see, let me go back out again. Once you get your end, just grab it, and you're not going to pull out to the side. You're just going to hold this and pull straight, and just keep pulling straight until you get it out. And then you can let go, and then you can just kind of gently straighten that out. I'm going to put this down here. The reason you do that is if you start pulling out to the side, you are probably going to get yourself some knots. And sometimes those knots get bad enough where you have to clip them out because you can't get them pulled out with your fingers. Okay, now this strand's pretty long. I'm going to say it's about 30 inches. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take each end and I'm going to make the two ends meet so that it's doubled up. So I'm going to do this, and now my two ends are right there, and then on the other end you now have a loop. Okay, all right, it's hard to, I'm needing to get a tablecloth there, you can see better. And I do plan on purchasing one where hopefully this table top as a background is not that great. So I'm hopefully going to graduate to a tablecloth soon. Okay, now I'm going to take this, and this has sponges in it. This is the salad dressing thing that I referred to in the last video. I have 3 squares of sponges in here, and the only reason I have 3 is so that my top sponge pretty much meets the top of the container. Now, depending on what kind of container you have, you may have to cut your sponge a little bit to fit. You may have to cut it a lot to fit. Usually I go through about 2 rectangle sponges just cutting and getting them to fit. But I use this for about a week, maybe 2 weeks. At the most, because then sponges start to get kind of nasty no matter how many times you might rinse them out. There's nothing but water in here. They're damp. I rinse them out with water each week, and then I just squeeze it out, and then I put them in. And then if I keep it like another week, I'll rotate the sponges. And that way they'll last me a little bit longer that way, and they stay fairly fresh. So what I'm going to do, and you don't have to do this, but I know a lot of people talk about, you'll hear stitchers talk about thread magic or beeswax or some kind of a thread conditioner. And what I want to tell you is that you honestly don't need thread conditioner, even for threads that are metallic or anything like that, specialty threads. You really don't need thread conditioner. Here's what you do if you want to make your thread go through a little bit easier. You want it to go through the material easier. So I just kind of start here and I put my finger down and I'll run this end over it. And then I will turn it around so that then I can run the rest of the thread over it. And you see it makes it straight. So any kinks you had in it will make it a lot straighter, and I think it makes the stitches a little bit better, and it just runs through the fabric a little bit easier. So sometimes then you have to, just kind of straighten it up, make sure your ends are even. Okay, now I am going to thread my needle, and I guess you could say I thread it like a man would thread it, and I know that sounds like a horrible thing to say, but women apparently thread their needles a little differently than men. I don't know what that deal is, but I just kind of, and sometimes, and I'm a licker too. So, and don't feel ashamed if you have to lick the tip. It's fine just to kind of get it smoothed out. So what I have to do, let me take my glasses off so I can actually see. That's horrible. Taking my glasses off so I can see what I'm doing here. And I am going to try to show up close where you can see. And then just put it through the eye like that. Kind of like, and this reminds you of sewing right now. And then, of course, here's my loop on the other end. Now, I'm going to show you 2 different ways to start your thread because you're actually going to need to know both of those methods. One method is the preferred method, which is neater. The other method is going to be necessary because you can't always start with a loop on the end. And I will show you why shortly. Now, what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to actually stitch while looking through the camera so I can make sure I see what I'm doing. So this is going to be interesting. Okay, so we have 14 count Aida. I'm going to try to keep this as close to the camera as I can so you can see. We're going to learn the basic cross stitch. Now, as you can see, you've got some very definite squares here. It's almost like a grid. And this is why a lot of people, or the preferred method is to use Aida when you're first learning to stitch, because you do have the squares that are definite there and there's not guesswork to it. So you actually come up from the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to take my needle. I'm going to come up from the bottom and I'm just going to pick a square. Okay, so I've got my needle here. Now, if you notice, the needle's there, and it is in the bottom left corner. And I'm going to take this out just a minute to show you. Okay, so this is bottom left. This is the top right. Here's the bottom right and top left. That is a square, so that's what we're focusing on, putting the X in. So I'm going to come in the back and put my needle back in. Okay, there it is. Now, I'm going to pull my needle through and I'm going to turn it over to the back. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my finger and I'm going to put it here. And I'm not going to press really hard. I need the thread to be able to slide like that, and I'm going to stop right there. And I'm going to hold it because I need some room for my loop there. Now just hold it and you're going to turn it back. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my X. You start bottom left and now I'm going to go to the top right. So my needle's going to go in here. I'm trying to keep where you can see it well. Okay, so it's going in the top right. And I pulled it through, and that is the first leg of my X. Now I'm going to turn it to the back, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to slide it through, if I can pick it up, slide it through that loop, and then I'm just going to pull until it catches like that. Now it's caught, and it's a very neat look on the back. Now I don't have to worry about holding that now. So I'm going to bring my needle up to the, let me find it here, bottom right. Okay, I'm going to pull it through until it catches. Okay, so you can see it's come through. So you want to gently pull where it's tight, but you don't want to like tug really hard, because then you're going to warp your fabric and you may even break your thread if you're really zealous about it. Okay, so now to complete the X, I'm going to go into the top left corner, put my needle down through there, pull through, and you want to pull it taut. Okay, now not jerking on it or anything, but you're pulling it taut, and there's your X. Now I'm going to do a few more of these, and I'm going to show you how you can make your, I'm going to show you right now actually how you can make your X's look really neat. And I think sometimes the best way is just to dive right in. And some people might think it's too soon for me to teach you this, but I'm going to do it, because if you get in the habit early, then you'll be fine and you won't know anything different. So what I'm going to do for my next X, I'm going to go right to this side, right to the right side of this X. So I'm actually going to come up in the hole that's here that was in the bottom right of the first X, but now we're moving to the next box. So this becomes the bottom left of that next box. And I'm going to pull my thread through. Okay, you're going to pull it through until it's all the way. Okay, and so I see there was a little bit hanging there, so I just needed to just kind of gently tug. And if you feel like see this happening? It's kind of loose now. So what I do is I just kind of grab my end and I just kind of run my fingers from the bottom on up until I get it looking decently again. Now I'm going to show you a technique as we're learning this called railroading, as we're learning this cross stitch. Railroading means that when you're making your X's, that these two strands, see we've got two strands, are lying side by side like a railroad track. And when they lie side by side, you get better coverage of the fabric and your X's look neater and more professional. Now, you may not be interested in doing this on a professional level. Sorry about the phone, sorry. Yeah, we can tell I'm not a professional video maker, that's for sure. But anyway, I have entered my work into the state fair, into county fairs. I am very much looking into doing this professionally. And when I retire from my teaching career, I am seriously thinking about starting a craft business. So I have to think along professional lines. But I want you to learn this just so when you're learning this, that you're seeing how neat your X's are, and you can decide, do I want to keep doing this? Is it worth it? Or do I need to just not worry about it? Because some people don't railroad, they just do their X's and they go on. However, if you want to make your X's neat, really neat, what I do, here's how I railroad. So I take my needle and I just, trying to do it through the camera here. I slide it in between the two threads, and then I'm going to my top right corner to make my first leg. And so I'm going to pull that through. There, do you see the difference between those two right there? That this one is covering a little bit more. It's a little bit neater. Now I'm going to come down to bottom right, bring my needle up through there, pull through. And when I'm coming up, I don't worry about the railroading. It's not necessary. But now again, I am going to just put my needle through there, and then I'm going to go to the top left and pull it through. Okay. So I'm going to show you again just the X without trying to railroad, just so you can get the pattern of it. And the magic of videos is you can play this over and over as many times as you need to get it. So I'm going to come back up into this corner right here, which becomes the bottom left of the next square. I'm going to pull it through, top right, okay, and sometimes you have to pull through a little bit from the bottom just to make sure it's all through, and then come up bottom right, top left, okay. Now, let's say I want to skip a square. Well, I can do that. So instead of me going here, which would start my next one right beside it, I'm going to skip over one to this one. And I'm going to come up, okay, top right, then I'm going to go down to bottom right and go top left. Okay, now I've skipped one. And you'll have to do that a lot. Sometimes with count a cross stitch, you will be skipping around a lot depending on what your pattern is like. Now, with cross stitch, again, there are no solid hard rules. There's just best practice. If you decide that you want to do the top left to bottom right and then top right to bottom left and make an X, you are more than welcome to do that. You can make your X any way you want. But best practice would be, however you decide to make the X, do it the same way throughout your pattern. Don't do things differently. Do it the same way so that all of your X's look, they don't start looking really wonky. They all look the same. Okay, so let's say I want to go to the next row and come back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to this one. That's the bottom left of the square right underneath that X. I'm going to pull mine through. I'm going to railroad this one, so I'm just going to slide my needle, and then I'm going to put it into the top right. Slide it through, and then I'm going to come up in bottom right. I'm going to railroad my stitch, just slide it through just like that, and then I'm going to go to top left. Okay. Now this one I'm going to just go all the way across here. So I'm going to go to the next square. There's my bottom left of my next square, and I'm just coming back. And sometimes, like if it gets really twisted, you can actually take your needle and you can turn it like that to untwist it. I do that a lot as I go. And then I'm going to railroad top right. And then bottom right. And this is just a habit for me. I just slide my needle in there and then top left. And I just go. All right, so I'm going to let you just watch me do these next three. And I'm not going to say anything, you just watch. Some of these stitches aren't going to be the best because I've heard people talk about how hard it is to do it through the camera. They're not joking. This is a little awkward, but it will get the job done. And I'm happy to do it if it will pass along the needle arts to other people. And that you maybe find a craft you enjoy. And you see how I just grabbed that thread and picked it up? I was railroading, and I wasn't even thinking about it. I was just doing it. Okay, so there are a couple of rows. Well, let's say we want to stop with this color. Maybe I got another color or something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn over to the back, and I want to end this. You don't want to do a knot or anything to start, and we don't want to just cut it off because we need to secure the thread to make sure that it doesn't come unraveled at some point. So my policy is I always take my needle. Let's see how close I can get up here. Okay, so take my needle and I'm going to run it through the top thread. You don't want to go all the way down, but I'm going to go through 1, 2, 3, 4, about 4 or 5, and you just push it through. It looks like it'd be hard to do. It's not hard to push through. It goes through pretty easily. And I just pull until it stops. It's secure. Now I'm going to take my scissors. You don't want to leave a tail when you cut it. If you've put it through 4 or 5 threads, you're good. So you're going to cut this as closely as you can. Now if I know where my tips are and I can see them, I'm not going to cut off anything unimportant. So I'm going to put this in and snip. I snipped it. See how close I snipped it? Now, I do one stitch at a time. Some people, I'll show you how if they have like a row to do, they'll do one leg of the X all the way across and then come all the way back. This I've found, I think it makes the stitches neater, and your back is more likely to reflect what's on your front. Now, that is not important to a lot of stitchers. It's really not that important to me, but I just enjoy stitching so much more when I can stitch it a whole stitch at a time. Now, I will show you the other method of doing it one leg at a time, and you can decide how you want to do it. And this typically applies when you have like a whole row of the same color, or rows of the same color. And notice how I'm just taking my fingers and just running it through just to smooth it a little bit. You want to make sure as you're doing this that you have, I'm find it here, you've got a tail. Okay, so here's my tail, and you want to make sure that that tail is not right up at your needle. You want it to be down a little bit. Okay, so, and then there's the end of my tail there, and then here's the rest of the thread. Because what happens, and typically when I've taught students how to cross stitch, they'll get to the point where their tail is all the way up really close to their needle, and next thing you know, that thread is out of the needle and they have to rethread. And one of the things I found with especially middle school aged children, they're still learning dexterity skills, and this is really good to help them with that. But one of their big hurdles is to learn how to thread the needle. So some of them may spend one whole meeting we have just getting their needle threaded and learning how to thread it, which is fine. As an adult, of course, that's not going to be the issue. But, you know, if you get stuck on one thing and you're struggling and struggling, just keep at it. Take a break if you need to, take a breath, and then try it again. Don't let one little thing, one little hurdle discourage you from the craft, because we've all had to get through some struggles at some point. So I just kind of smooth this out. And I do want to say at this point, and I should have said this at the beginning, you want to make sure that you are washing your hands before each stitching session. There are oils that gather on our hands, so even though you might think your hands are clean and you haven't really been into anything, the oils will make a difference on your fabric, and they may not show up immediately, but it will show up over time. So you want to keep your hands as clean as possible as you're working, and that will prevent so many oils getting onto the fabric and possibly messing it up. Okay, so now I don't have a loop. If you've noticed, I've cut it off. There's no loop. It's just my ends here. So I'm going to show you two things here. So I'm going to take my needle, I'm going to come down a little bit, and I'm going to come up in this bottom left corner. And then I'm going to flip it to the back. Make sure I take my finger and I'm holding it. And I'm going to pull this through to about right there. Okay, where I can still see some past my finger. The first method I showed you was the loop method to start. For me, it's the preferred method. This is, we just call it catching the tail. And so you're going to keep your finger on that tail as you flip it back. And I'm going to do my railroading, okay? And I'm going to go into my top right, okay? Now, I'm going to come into the bottom right, but I'm not doing this to complete the X. Okay, I'm going to pull it through a little bit. Now, I'm going to flip over to the back, and you see where my thread is. And so I'm just going to, I always like to just kind of make sure, I'm going to hold that. And it'll be a little awkward at first. I'm going to get the tail pulled through there. Now, this, I can untwist it there. It's a little twisted. I'm just going to make sure and kind of make sure my tail is through that loop, and I'm going to hold that tail, and that way when I pull through, which now it's come out of my needle, that it's going to catch. And you see where it catches, and now that this tail's not really going anywhere. And so as you go now, you'll have stitches that cover some more of this tail. But my needle has come unthreaded because I was not paying attention. I was pulling it through. So let me rethread my needle. And let's see. And some threads are easier than others. Now I've got my glasses off and I can't thread it. There we go. There we go. Okay. So now, instead of, I'm not going to go up into this corner like I normally would, this top left. I'm going to go make my next leg for the next X. And I'm doing the first leg on each X, going across. You can see this on the back, it's starting to catch that tail. I'm going to do this for just a few. This is not my preferred method, but you might like it better. And I'm just going to keep going down into the right corner of each one and coming up into, or the left corner, and then keep coming into the top right. So you see, okay, so there I've got all the first legs. Now, what I'm going to do is come down the bottom right. Now I'm going to come back. And I'm not going to railroad here. I'm just going to show you. I'm going to go top left. Okay, bottom right. Top left. Bottom right. Top left. And then bottom right. And top left. Okay, now I have another row of X's. Some people think this is faster and they like to do it this way. Like I said, I do not. I don't enjoy that. Now, if you prefer that, by all means, go for it. But the way I will be teaching is by doing full cross stitches. And then I'm going to show you some other stitches, of course. Now, as you notice here on the back, you see some of these threads have caught this tail. Now, let's say I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to show you the full stitches again. I'm going to come across again. Okay, so I'm going to go bottom left. And I'm going to do my railroad here. So I'm going to put my needle between the two threads, top right. Okay, and then bottom right, railroad, sometimes easier than others, top left. Okay, and then this becomes the bottom left. And then I'm going to railroad, top right, bottom right. And whoop, sometimes it's a little hard to find the thread. And then top left. And bottom right. And sometimes I smooth it out to do it. And then top right. Bottom right. Top left. I'm trying to keep this in camera range, so I do apologize if you're like, oh, you're going off the screen, I can't see. Hopefully I have done this enough where you can see enough of it where you get it. And then that goes bottom right. And then top left. Okay, so we're going to secure the thread. And it's going to be the same way as last time. I'm going to pick up these top threads here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you don't have 5, 4 or 5 as you can. Sometimes I can't even do 4 or 5, but sometimes I'll go back and secure it the other direction too if I can't get 4 or 5. And now I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut this one. Okay. Now, we still have this tail. So this one's been secured. See how many have gone over? So I'm going to cut that one off too. Now this thread is going to go in this container of my orts, my old ratty threads. And this one is pretty much done. I'm going to slide it out, put that in on my needle minder there, and slide that in. And the more you stitch, the more you can tell, I can use that thread a little more. No, that's going to cut it too close. So that's an experience thing. Okay, so now we have these done, and that is your basic cross stitch. So that will take care of it for this first video. So now, if you are following my tutorials, you just need to get a piece of Aida fabric and you need to practice this. And I would not do any other type of stitch until you feel like you have this down pat, and then you can move on to the next thing. All right, we'll see you later.